So I'm Judy. I'm Judy Cook. I am an occupational therapist by training, by education. And later in life, I became a health coach because I've always been interested in nutrition. I've always had extra weight on me, and I was very interested in nutrition, so I became a health coach. I later added to my repertoire of services and became a Reiki master as well. So most of you don't look very familiar. Have you heard me speak here before? No. I see a lot of none of don't look familiar, which is good. Well, it's not good, but I'm glad you're here, so welcome. And part of the reason I asked that is primarily because I like to tell different stories, not always the same. So, what is gluten? How many people are here need that answer? Like, what is gluten? Where does it come from? How do I stay away from it? Okay. So gluten is a protein naturally found in some grains. Not all grains, but some grains, including wheat, barley, and rye. Okay? And then there's a barley-rye mixture that it's also in that as well, obviously. Gluten acts as a binder, holding food together and adding that stretchy, that doughy, gooey texture to the breads and pizza doughs that we all love the most. Okay, but it adds to the quality of the food. So it's one of the things we'll talk about is how it's hidden in various things because of that quality, that it has that stretchy binding piece. So what foods contain gluten? Oh, did I take the good ones? Correct. And when we first start looking at gluten, that's exactly where we go. It's all the good ones. My first thought about gluten, I was in my early 40s, I believe, and I started working at Summit Rehab, which used to be in the original OPA building. And a lot of my coworkers were gluten-free, and I'm like, what is gluten? Well, I don't have any idea. Obviously, that was before I became a health coach. Learned a lot about it before I actually became the health coach. So they were great in educating me and letting me figure it out and kind of work. But my first thought was, cereals? Well, that's my quiet time in the morning. When I get everybody else settled off, I can sit down and have my bowl of cereal. I mean, it wasn't long, but it was my bowl of cereal, and it was shredded wheat or Cheerios. It wasn't anything really bad and high sugary. But I'm like, that's my breakfast. So it was too much for me to tackle at that moment. I had young children and so forth. So it was too much. But I then later tackled it because I was in a different place and could do that. Okay. So what foods contain gluten? Most of your breads. Not all, but most. Your cereals, the whole cereal aisle. Unless it says gluten-free at the very end, if you're going up away from the cash registers, at least in Hannaford, most of them are gluten. And then, never mind the sugar, that's another topic. Pizza, cookies, cakes, sweetbreads, brownies, tortilla shells, donuts, pasta, pies, oatmeal. In and of itself, oatmeal is not gluten, does not contain gluten. The problem with oatmeal is it gets contaminated in the growing process if it's grown near a wheat or a barley or a rye field. Or processed in a plant that is processing those things. Quaker oats at one time, and I have not seen this in the last several months, at one time, Quaker Oats would have on the back of their oats, they would state gluten-free oats, not steel cut, but gluten-free oats, and it would state about the contamination and about the fact that they separate. I have not seen that on a Quaker oats for a very long time.
Cheerios has a box of Cheerios that says gluten-free on it that I've tried. It's great.
Right.
I don't know if it really is gluten-free.
Well, do we ever really know?
Tastes too good.
Right. It's like the question of organic or not organic. I answer that question all the time regarding. I've had a mentor who was an organic farmer, and he told me what the criteria was for organic, having an organic farm, and it's very vague and very much can be interpreted differently. The best thing about that is, do we ever really know? And my answer to that is, do the best you can. Do the best you can. When it comes down to fruits, vegetables, animal products, if you want organic, know your farmer. Know who they are, get to know them, so that you know what they are, what they're feeding their animals if you're buying their products. Over there. And, what they're putting on their fruits and their vegetables. And again, in New Hampshire, that's a little hard to do because we only can do that within maybe 5 months out of the year because it's our growing season. So that's another, that's an issue. Do the best we can. All right, so all of these products that we talked about, mostly white carbs. And we know we're supposed to stay away from, minimize our carbs, right? Carbs in the form of white things, not colorful, bright fruits and vegetables. I feel that there should be two categories there, but. And the other thing with white carbs, typically those white carbs, a lot of those things we talked about have sugar. And again, sugar is something that most of us do need to cut back on. Okay. So other items that have gluten in them are spelt, semolina, which is pasta, typically, farro, graham, like graham crackers, rosito, soy, and modified food starch. Okay, so you'll see those. Gluten is naturally occurring. So if it's naturally occurring in our grains, why is it why is it not the best for many of us? I don't want to say it's bad because it's really, Cindy.
Part of it is originally people did not farm grains and stuff. Mostly they were eating, meat and berries and stuff they could forage, maybe dig up roots and things like that. And then when grain did come in, it wasn't as bad for us when it was before it's been modified so many times.
Right there.
Because if
That's
I'm
your
in
key.
Europe, although that's going to change there too, unfortunately, I could eat gluten there and not have a reaction to it because
When you were where?
in Europe.
Yes.
But unfortunately, they've just opened that up for GMOs there, so
Oh.
I know, it's so discouraging. I think part of that has to do with the war in Ukraine and they don't have enough
Grain to go around.
grain, so they have to try to GMO it to get more out of a smaller
Right.
area.
Yes.
Is it also an issue that they spray a lot of the grains and they put things, the whole idea with vitamin Bs and.
They're modifying it.
Yeah, modified pesticides, all those things.
And the other issue is, and again, this is more of a financial piece, is they're really not allowing, in this country, they're not allowing our grain to grow to its full maturation before they cut it down and process it. So it's a rawer product, and a lot of our systems can't break it down.
It's all about money.
Right. That really saddens me about Europe and the GMOs being let into Europe because it bothers me so greatly that we as a country allow GMOs in our foods. We're not helping the health of our people at all. And the GMOs is a big thing. But Cindy's story of going to Europe and eating the bread is very true. I've heard it from many, many people. And then a few years ago, I went over to Spain to visit our daughter who was on exchange program there. And I'm like, well, I have to test this out, right? I'm a health coach. I have to test this out. And I ate the bread in Spain and Portugal. And when we crossed the border, I said, okay, I will stop eating the bread. And I did not have any symptoms. It
Drink
didn't.
the wine too over there.
You can drink the wine. But they usually grow what they eat within their communities, and they grow things to full maturation. Yes, they don't modify
Not
them.
to be stupid, but I'm stupid about
That's
this.
it. No.
GMO, is that chemicals that they put in?
Genetically modified, yes, genetically modified
Something.
organisms.
Organism, okay.
Okay,
All right, so it is chemicals they're putting in which creates.
correct.
Okay,
And you'll see on labels now, non-GMO.
yes, yeah.
Okay, and we'll talk about labels a lot because that's the big piece. So gluten can be hidden in things because of its binding and because of its different qualities. It can be hidden like in salad dressings. It can be hidden in sauces. A lot of the sauces that you'll get in a restaurant will have gluten in them. If you are unable to tolerate gluten at all and you go to a restaurant, you need to ask questions of the waitstaff and make sure they go back and ask the cook. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Please do not be afraid to ask questions because you don't want to go to a restaurant and go home and feel lousy. Okay, so what's that lousy feel like? What's that lousy feeling? So we're going to talk about, do we all need to be gluten-free? I did a presentation once to do on body mechanics actually to Meals on Wheels drivers, which was very interesting. And one of them, somehow we got into nutrition. And one of them asked me, my wife says that she found an article and if you're gluten-free and you don't need to be gluten-free, it's bad for your health. My answer to that was, we just talked about a lot of the glutinous products are the white carbs, and we all know that we're supposed to minimize our white carbs in our eating. Okay, so no, it is not dangerous to your health. However, there are benefits to some of those grains, right? Whole grains have fiber, they have vitamin B, they have magnesium, they have iron in them, and some of them have a prebiotic, which is a feeding of the good bacteria in your gut. So they do have benefit, okay? However, people with celiac definitely cannot eat gluten. And then there's several people, Cindy being one of them, if you don't mind me sharing that. I should have asked that first, sorry, that are sensitive, and you can identify if you're gluten sensitive or you're sensitive to certain foods with an IgG test, food sensitivity test. There's some variability in that.
It doesn't always show up,
Correct,
but I know it through experience.
correct. And that's your key right there, is knowing how you feel.
From what I understand, can they do would the IgG be more, because I did that, but I haven't had gluten in a long time, so it's not going to show up in the IG. But the IgG is the one that, will that show more, the gluten sensitivity?
No, I think you're talking about,
Blood test for food allergies.
yeah, no. For food allergies is different.
Okay,
It's very different than food sensitivity.
gotcha.
So if it's a food allergy, you're going to know that within 15 minutes of eating something, right? You're going to break out in hives, you're going to get an anaphylactic going on, the whole thing. If it's food sensitivity, it can take up to 72 hours for your body to respond to it. So, sometimes we feel really lousy and we think, oh, what did I eat today or what did I eat yesterday? Well, think about what you might have eaten 2 days before that. Okay? And some of the symptoms are bloating, headaches, joint pain, which is a big one. I'm too far ahead of myself already. These should be floating off my head, and they're not. Where am I? Okay. Bowel issues. Sometimes you alternate between constipation and diarrhea. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. Okay. Intestinal damage. Sometimes the gluten can break down the intestinal barrier in your gut, which is called leaky gut. And that can be very uncomfortable. It can be very painful for people. Inflammation. And again, we think about inflammation with the joints. We don't always think about inflammation in our bellies. We just figure that's just who we are. And we don't think about inflammation in our brain fog, around our heart. Okay. And it's
Are you talking about the sensitivity or the actual celiac, or both?
most of the sensitivity.
Okay.
Celiac is a totally different ballgame,
Okay.
and you definitely need to stay away from gluten. But this is more the sensitivity. And these are all just different systems. Skin rashes or skin irritation. So it comes out in so many, I don't know if anybody else has any other symptoms, but
Swelling of tissues and.
yes. But it comes out in many different ways. So it's really hard to know, was it, is it, what, it, we get confused. It's really easy to be confused until you feel so lousy that somewhere, hopefully in the medical system, they've said, take out gluten. I will tell you from my clinical experience and my experience with personally with friends, POTS and MS are two syndromes that I have found definitely are related with gluten. They respond, if people pull gluten from their diet, their symptoms and their I can't think of the word. Their symptoms are decreased. Thank you. Are not decreased significantly. Alleviated.
Yes, I'm reading a book right now, Grain Belly, and all kinds of things. Kids with behavioral issues,
Yes.
Tourette's, CJ, because of course we've read about so much since he passed away, because he had bipolar, Tourette's. I have a niece and nephew who are celiacs. I'm sensitive to gluten. I think CJ was, and that can affect your brain chemistry.
100 moods.
Yes.
Totally, it can affect your moods. Sugar's another big one for moods. So it can, and again, how do we know if we're sensitive to it? Okay. So, autoimmune syndromes fall into that same category. I had a friend or associate more that got diagnosed with MS, and I just very casually said, look at your diet and look at gluten. And I didn't go any further with it. I just said, just do it. She pulled gluten out and her symptoms minimized significantly. And I have a friend from college who has had MS since she was in college. And in the last 4 years, she pulled gluten. And she's just avid. So she's like so frustrated and angry at the medical system because nobody suggested it to her beforehand. And I'm not sure she would have been in a place to do it beforehand. And sometimes that's the point. Like when I couldn't give, I was like, I can't step into that. That's my cereal bowl. And then later on, I could step into it. For me personally, so when I first found out, heard about gluten, I was in my early 40s. Probably in my 50s, so between there, I would pull, I would minimize it. But I totally pulled it out when I was in my 50s, my early 50s, so 10 years later. And about that time, I started developing a muffin top. And I'm like, I never had a muffin top. I always had extra weight on me. I was never this skinny little thing. But I was like, I've never had a muffin top. I'm like, it's probably menopausal, premenopausal, whatever stage I was in. So I was very confused. Not confused. I was like, okay, I got to live with it, right? I went gluten-free, 100%. I lost my muffin top. So if I have a weekend or a week where I've indulged in gluten, that little muffin top comes back. So that's where I hold my inflammation. For some people, it might be their skin. They might get headaches, joint pain. Sugar is my joint pain issue. So, like my mother used to love to, dance, but she had significant arthritis. And so she would say, oh, after a Christmas party, when we used to have Christmas parties, right? And they would dance all night. She loved it. She had so much fun. Next day, she couldn't move. I said, Mom, did you have fun last night? She said, yeah. I said, it was worth it then. And sometimes, we kind of have to play that. All right, so what are foods that are gluten-free? Can we survive being gluten-free? Absolutely. I think you've got at least 4 people in here that have done it. It is possible. It is tricky at first, much easier now than it was 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
There's a lot more options out there. But what's gluten-free? Your fruits, your vegetables, none of those have gluten in them unless we put it on them. Your legumes, nuts, seeds, your fish, eggs, poultry, meats, as long as they're non-processed. And then when I was doing some research just to make sure I was accurate, I looked up if it's grass-fed or grain-fed meat, does the gluten carry over? And mostly what I found was it said no. Do I 100% agree with that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I do. Because really, whatever they eat, that's in their meat. And that's what we're eating. So grass-fed or grain-fed, again, we do the best we can and how we can do that. So, and the other issue is you don't really find a lot of information. You find a lot of information about gluten-free eating, but it really doesn't, there's not a lot out there that really supports gluten-free eating. And the medical system doesn't really talk about it because they don't know. They're not taught nutrition.
Judy, how long, let's say you inadvertently get some in your body, how long does it stay in your system?
Staying in your system, that depends on a lot of
I read
factors.
different things and I just did not.
Yeah, it depends on a lot of factors. Typically, again, that food sensitivity will take 3 days, but it depends. If you're not drinking a lot of water, because the water will help your body process those toxins, because they're toxins to you. If you are, if you have any of those symptoms we talked about. But if you're not drinking enough water, then you're not helping your body flush that stuff out. It could be depending on how much it was or how much it was, and then how long of an intake you had of it. But typically 3 days. So.
How about dairy products? Do they have gluten, dairy?
For the most part, no.
Okay.
But read your labels. Be careful. Because they're tucking stuff in. Like, again, it could be a filler. So you need to read your labels on anything, truly, if you're making switches. So I brought a lot of different products, and we'll talk about them. But I have a lot of different products that are quote-unquote gluten-free, just to give you an idea. Quinoa, high protein, no gluten. It's a pseudo cereal. That coffee cake over there has gluten. It's made with quinoa. That's its primary ingredient. Brown, black, and red rice, buckwheat, amaranth. Oh, I said that right. Millet. Those 3 are your ancient grains that are all gluten-free. I have a thing of buckwheat over there.
High fiber.
Right. And again, your fiber in all of those. Corn is gluten-free. However, corn, again, we're having the problem that they're cutting it down and processing before it's fully matured. So it's harder for people to digest, and a lot of people are having problems with corn. So just, again, be aware and consider that, just be aware and, pay attention to what your body is telling you. Sorghum, teff, gluten-free oats, tapioca, which is a kavasa root. Gluten-free oats, steel cut oats.
What about lentils?
Lentils are good.
Yeah,
Lentils are good.
I thought so.
Yeah, they fall into that legume category. And lentils are great for protein as well.
Yes.
So those are all, the steel cut oats. The steel cut oats are supposed to be gluten-free. Technically, it should say gluten-free on the package. So with oats, I just use caution, kind of like with corn. Use caution. If you eat it and your body, you get a bellyache or a headache or, maybe that's not the best thing for me. Maybe I need to try, stick with the quinoa or the buckwheat. I do, my cereal bowl now is quinoa or buckwheat with fresh berries, sunflower seeds, and the buckwheat, just because it's a little drier and more fibrous, I put a little bit of maple syrup on it and cinnamon. And that's my morning breakfast. Every morning, not always, but a lot of mornings. It's quick, it's easy. I make it up, big batch, throw it in the refrigerator, take out a scoop, and start my breakfast. So
Do you use buckwheat flour do you sprinkle buckwheat flour over things?
you can,
Yeah.
and it can add more fiber and more texture.
Yeah, and it also has a sweetness to it,
Yes.
buckwheat flour.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's something that, you can't find it a lot of times. Where do you find your buckwheat flour?
At Hannaford's, it comes from very north. It comes from a farm that is very in northern New Hampshire, where the border is between here and Canada. And I think, yeah, and it's right here, and it's also still.
Is it with the flowers? Is it with the other flowers? Or is it in the
Yes,
gluten-free
it's with
section?
the other flowers, but it's down
In
under.
the bottom.
Yeah, and it's a gray bag.
So you gotta go
Oh,
and
this
pay
is a
for
good
it.
one. I go to Ocean State
You
Job
gotta
Lots
look.
for all
You
my.
gotta squat down and look.
Yeah.
And
And the
see how
gluten
much
free
it
is really cheap. Now I've
Yeah.
told everybody.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
remember
Everything's
too.
$2. Now,
Where is it?
Yeah.
Ocean State.
Ocean
Job Lots
Jace-
in there. Oh my gosh, my
They have a
my-
huge selection of
my
Bob's,
haven, yep.
Yeah.
and it is cheaper than most of your grocery stores around here. In Bob's, sometimes, again, you need to be careful with it. Bob's is a little, like Bob's gluten-free flour, a little bit grainier than King Arthur's one-to-one mixture. So it depends. Like at the holidays, if I'm making sweetbreads and I make them for gluten-free friends or for my family, then I'll bring out the King flour, the King Arthur flour. The rest of the year, depending on what I'm doing, I might do the Bob's because it's cheaper.
Bob's has a really good pancake blend out.
Yeah, it is.
I can't eat a lot of that either because I have to worry about carbs and sugar, but when my grandsons come, they don't know the difference.
Yep.
They're lighter.
Yes. There's another mixture over there, Pamela's,
This is great.
which is, again, a pancake mix that
And muffins and cookies.
Yep, works really well. So one of the things, as we're talking about all these alternate gluten-free items, is you need to be careful, and again, you need to know your body. Somewhere a while ago, I did a cleanse, and I chose their dairy-free, because the cleanse you're supposed to be dairy-free, so I chose their dairy-free powder, which was basically a green powder. And like 2 weeks into it, I was like, something's not right, and it's something to do with the cleanse because I've been eating clean this whole time. And I looked at the ingredients on that dairy-free product, and it had rice in it. And the clarity came to me that it was the rice in there. I recently had protein powder that was given to me. I did not read the label. I had just the protein powder in water the day before. I went cross-country skiing, and I felt like I had lead in my pants. And I'm like, I slept well. I did, I ate fine. Trying to figure it out. I went back and I looked at the ingredients, and it was a rice blend. So consequently, I can't do, I stay away from rices.
Have you tried the pea powder?
Yes.
The pea protein?
Yeah.
Pea protein.
Yep.
Pea, thank you, pea.
How about wild rice?
Wild rice, again, it depends on if it's made with white rice. Like I can do wild rice in small doses. But those when they're like the powder, like those two that are rice blended, it was the primary ingredient. And it was just too much for my system. And the cleaner you eat, and when you go off,
Reaction's worse.
the reaction is where you respond quicker.
Yeah.
You respond much quicker. So, I was eating gluten and, I didn't, why do I need to go gluten-free? Well, I was like, all right, we're going to try this. And again, I lost that muffin top. So that told me that I had inflammation in my system, and that's where it hung out. Okay. So, but the cleaner you eat, the quicker you do respond when you go off of that. And, that's not a bad thing because that's just our body telling us what we need and what we don't need.
Don't some of the alcohols have gluten, like beer and things like that? Don't they have?
There are gluten-free. I think one is Redbridge is a gluten-free beer. So there are out there. Your hard ciders tend to be gluten-free. Tito's, it will say right on it, gluten-free. It's a vodka. Think about your hard alcohol. Most of it's grain alcohol. So look for gluten-free. Tequila is alcohol-free.
Alcohol, no,
You mean
but
gluten-free?
I mean gluten-free. It's not alcohol-free.
Spoil it.
I know. So, but it's like, back in the day when Snackwells came out with all their fat-free and all that fat-free scenario, what did they do? They added sugar to it to increase the flavor. So you have to be careful. You have to watch what they do to substitute.
And people think when you're eating low fat, so much of the low fat stuff has all this other junk in there.
Right.
You are better off with your full fat stuff than anything that's.
Your body needs good fats.
Fat's important for your brain.
Fats are very important for your brain. The good fats that you eat create the cholesterol that your body needs. Your cholesterol then makes your hormones. Your cortisol hormone to handle stress, your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and any other hormones in your body. You need cholesterol. So to take out fat completely is not, in my clinical and professional experience, not the best choice.
Have you done any research on cholesterol? I've read a lot. My whole family has high cholesterol, always have. Nobody's ever had a heart attack or anything from it. CJ was a vegan and he had high cholesterol. Your body will make cholesterol if you don't have enough. But also that cholesterol actually has a purpose, and these levels that they are very, what's the word I want?
Skewed.
Yes, on these studies and things, you have to take the whole picture, because I have high cholesterol, but I have very high good cholesterol. And I've been reading more about that, how important cholesterol is to your brain health and other things, and that going on statins can actually cause more issues.
Mm-hmm.
And don't necessarily help with, it might bring your numbers down, but it doesn't necessarily
It can also create
Other problems,
other problems like muscle tissue problems.
right? My mom had
So-
terrible joint pain when she went on Lipitor.
Yep, side effects. Caution in there. You know, and again, do a little research when a doctor wants to put you on a cholesterol med or a high blood pressure med, and really kind of, you know, do you have white coat syndrome? And so your blood pressure is high every time you go into the doctor's office.
What did you say? Do you have?
White coat syndrome.
Oh.
So your blood pressure goes up. I do deep breathing. I don't go to the doctor often, but I do deep breathing before they take my blood pressure.
Yeah.
I give blood on a fairly regular basis, so I know what my blood pressure is on a fairly consistent. And their numbers are, again, when you're over 50, your blood pressure is going to go up. It's natural because your body, your organs, your body, things are slowing down. So you're not pumping as hard. So with the gluten-free snacks, and I'll pick one or two, you need to, again, watch the ingredients because they might have other things in them. They might have a lot of potato starch in them, you know. So just, you have to be cautious. Ideally, when you're really reading labels, 5 ingredients or less. How's that for a challenge, right? It's possible, but it's a process. Some of us are over here like I was when I was in those early 40s, and I said, no way. And then some of us are over here because we've had to be or because we've chosen to be and we've made changes along the way. It's a process. Do what you can, when you can, and do the best you can every day, okay? So let's talk about breakfast. I've already talked about my breakfast. What's wrong with veggies and eggs? What's wrong with veggies? Veggies for breakfast? Yes, why not? If you need protein in the morning, especially if you're diabetic, then maybe you add a little leftover chicken. Cook once, eat 2 or 3 times. So when I cook chicken, I typically cook 4 servings. First of all, then I don't have to cook another night if so I just put leftovers, and I have a husband who doesn't complain about leftovers, so I'm very grateful. But make it easier on yourself. Lunch. Choose your bread wisely. We'll talk about the breads in a minute. 1 slice versus 2 if you're having a sandwich. You can put the same amount in the middle, but 1 slice versus 2. Salad versus a sandwich. Okay, if you have all the time in the world, but if you don't, that's not so easy unless you have it left over in a container. Again, some leftover veggies, great for lunch. Soups, all year long. Soups are great because you can just plunk those vegetables in there. Doesn't matter if they're on the recipe or not. Just keep putting more veggies in there. Dinner, we don't need dinner with bread. Some of us grew up with that, but we don't need that. Pizza, there are gluten-free doughs out there. There is,
Against the grain is wonderful.
right.
Thank you, I was gonna.
Which one?
Against the grain.
Against the grain.
Delicious.
And when you talk about fiberless ingredients, they make wonderful baguettes and rolls that have very few ingredients. Because most gluten-free things you'll see, like the pizza has a lot more because it's got toppings and stuff. But far less ingredients than others. And they taste like a French bread. They're very satisfying. Even my daughter, who's not gluten-free, she loves them. So
Right.
they're
Where
in
do
the
you
frozen.
find those?
They're in the frozen section at Hannaford's.
Hannaford's has them, yeah.
Yeah, and
And the
from
pizza's there
Walmart.
too?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah,
that?
the pizza's in the frozen?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
The
Yep.
pesto one is awesome.
Yes, that's my favorite too.
We're gonna go buy them all out now.
No,
You're
little,
gonna regret telling
little
us the
spinach,
secret.
balsamic glaze, little goat cheese on it.
In Hannaford, they also have Portland pie has a gluten-free dough.
Is it pizza pie dough or pie dough?
Yeah.
It's
It's.
pie dough. Well, no, it's
but
pizza dough.
Pizza dough.
It's pizza dough. Pizza pie. Yeah, pizza dough.
They have a basil one that's.
Yeah.
Good, but it's good, but it's not as like if you want more of a pizza taste, you'll get it more from Against the Grain, the frozen one.
Yeah.
The
So what did they put in the cauliflower pizza dough? Now, make a homemade cauliflower pizza. Hasn't stuck together yet.
Too much work in my opinion.
Well, I don't think it's that much work if I have cauliflower for something else, and then I usually have half a head, and I make the pizza just to do that. So I don't find it that much work truly, but it doesn't stay together. So, again, I have a husband who doesn't cook. He'll eat most everything I put in front of him, so I'm very grateful. But it's not something that I would probably serve to a guest if I was trying to serve pizza. I have done spaghetti squash, which brings me to spaghetti squash. Obviously, I have one of those over there. I've done spaghetti squash pizza dough, kind of like more of a casserole. That works very well and is very tasty.
We do love
Spaghetti squash, any recipe that you use with pasta, for the most part, you can use spaghetti squash. You just bake it. I bake it like if I'm making, cooking, having dinner, dinner, I bake up the spaghetti squash the night before, scrape it all out, put it in the fridge, and then the next night I take it out and I have a 15-minute meal. I saute up some mushrooms and spinach and maybe some tomatoes, and add the spaghetti squash to it, and I'm done in 15 minutes. And it comes out. You can put spaghetti sauce on the spaghetti squash. So you can do, the other thing that works really well, and someone else spoke to this, is the chickpea pasta. There's a lentil pasta and a chickpea pasta. Both of those have more protein in them than your regular pasta, and they have minimal ingredients in them. And you can do whatever. I've done macaroni and cheese with the chickpea pasta.
Just don't overcook.
Right.
It gets mushy fast.
It gets really mushy, so you have to be very careful. But it's a good option. Almond flour you can substitute for any recipe with flour in it, 1-to-1. Okay, just be careful you're not serving that to people who have nut allergies.
What about coconut flour with that?
Coconut flour you cannot do 1-to-1.
But you can mix it with the almond flour.
Correct. Yep. And King Arthur has a gluten-free, it's flour, and the wording is great for gluten-free recipes, or good for gluten-free recipes, and then they have a gluten-free measure 1-to-1. So it's two different flours, so be careful when you're looking at that. Those are in that gluten-free, Hannaford has a gluten-free section? Does everybody know that? Okay, on the opposite side of the, where the meats. All that is supposed to be all gluten-free. So that's where you'll find like the almond flour and the King Arthur gluten-free flour. You'll find Bob's snacks. You'll find all kinds of snacks, crackers and other things. You'll also find gluten-free crackers in some of the other regular sections in the store as well.
The nut pecan ones are delicious.
The what ones? Nutkins?
They're like the pecan ones, and they're cheese. They're delicious.
The nutkins. Again, cautious if you have anybody who's allergic to nuts, but they are good. Okay. Okay, parties. What do we do? Especially summer parties. What do we eat at summer parties? Hamburgers and hot dogs with buns, pasta salad, potato salad, right? So what do? Make a coleslaw. And I think on the back table there's an autumn coleslaw, which I absolutely love, that doesn't use mayonnaise. And I will serve that up a lot. But when you're invited to a party, just bring a dish that you can eat, or that you won't be paying for it the next day, right? Nobody's going to deny a fresh dish coming in, unless you're going to a fancy dancy party. They might. But, just bring something that you can have. Gluten-free cookies, whatever. Chocolate chip cookies use the same recipe. Just use the King Arthur flour, or the Bob's gluten-free flour, or the almond flour. You just substitute it in there. We talked about sugar, maple syrup. If you want to substitute maple syrup for sugar, it's for every cup of sugar, it's 3/4 a cup of maple syrup, and then you decrease your liquid by 1 tablespoon.
Okay, say that again.
Every cup of sugar, 3/4 cup of maple syrup, decrease your liquid by 1 tablespoon. Okay. And then you can use your maple syrup. Again, it's natural, your body recognizes it, especially if you're a New Hampshire, New England native, and it's grown in our backyard.
What about honey? Would you use honey?
I do use honey. I prefer maple syrup. I also have friends who are maple farmers, so I like to support them.
I interchange.
But yeah, but if I'm given honey, I use honey and maple syrup interchangeably. I just use more maple syrup because it's my preference. Oh, and the buns. So cut 1 bun in half, put it on the top and the bottom. So then you're only getting 1 piece of bread, not 2. If you want to go to the next step, use a good piece, a couple pieces of romaine lettuce, and use that as your bun. So it's still a hand food, which is why a lot of us don't want to give up that hamburger with the bun. It's messy, so make sure you have a couple extra napkins. But the lettuce can can substitute for the bun, so you don't need the whole bun. But cutting a bun in half, you still get some of the bread, but you don't get all of it. Okay. And hot dogs, I would choose that they just not be eaten. Okay. So, questions?
I saw some, when I was reading the packages, it said 1-to-1 with flour, the same measurements, but not to be used with yeast breads. What do? I live on bread and milk. I'm in trouble, aren't I?
Yeah. No. Not to be used. There you can do, King Arthur has a mix of a yeast bread that's gluten-free. So you can do that. There are recipes, I do not have any of them, that are recipes that use different flours. So you can make your own bread. And your best bet is probably just to Google gluten-free yeast bread, and you'll find it. My friends who were gluten-free way back then, they were doing all kinds of mixing their own flours and so forth. So sourdough, okay, so sourdough is one of your better options from a bread point of view when you're out for lunch. Okay, or you bring it into the house. Again, I would still recommend 1 piece versus 2, but sourdough, because of the way it's made, it's easier because of the sourdough component in it. It's easier for your body to break down.
It's still bothers me, I've tried.
Yeah, some people can do it, some people can't. So the Ezekiel bread, this is a sprouted grain bread. It's not totally gluten-free, but it says that it's flourless. And when you look at it, so it is made with wheat and barley, which are gluten, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. Spelt, again, is gluten. Millet is not. Okay? Some people cannot do regular wheat bread or white bread, but they can do the Ezekiel, and it works for them. Dave's 21 killer bread. Because a lot of the gluten-free breads have the rice in them, I just cut out most bread, but occasionally you want a piece of avocado toast, or at least I do. Or occasionally I need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because I'm going hiking. It's the easiest thing for me to take. It's 1 piece, I just put the peanut butter on, slap more peanut butter on there. But the Dave's Killer Bread has been my more recent choice of breads because it has the least amount of ingredients and I can pronounce everything in it. And it is a
And that's in the regular bread section.
regular bread section.
What about Abigail's Bakery? That, she does a nice gluten-free.
Yes.
Abigail's Bakery?
Oh,
Where is that? That the one on-
You can buy it in the store.
Okay.
It's really tasty.
Sam's
And I think the
Bakery.
health store sometimes has it as
Yes.
well.
Sam's Bakery is another one. They're out of Florida. You can order online. But the last time I was at Sunflower, they had it. Grand Canyon, Udi's. Grand Canyon is a newer one that's come out. I didn't find it at Hannaford when I was looking for it. So again, sometimes because it's depending on the demand or whatever, they might have it, they might not have it. Udi's is okay. I don't know what the rest of you think about it, but there, my opinion, like I thought the Grand Canyon was better than the Udi's.
Also, the bread peddler, the guy that makes breads, he periodically does a gluten-free one and brings them into the health food store.
Yep. So I'm just gonna pull this and I'm gonna pull this, actually. Okay. Chickpea pasta, when you look at these ingredients, we have chickpeas, pea starch, tapioca, and xanthan gum, okay, which is that's your stabilizer there. Okay. How many did I read? 4? 4 ingredients. What did I say? 5 is ideal. Hard to get to, but possible. Pamela's. This is the pancake mix. So this has brown rice flour, white rice flour, cultured buttermilk, almond meal, tapioca starch, sweet rice flour, potato starch, baking powder, baking potato starch again. Sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, and sea salt. Okay. So again, knowing that I can't do rice, I do have this in my house. My daughter loves it. She doesn't visit very often. It's probably the only time I make it. And if I eat it that infrequently, it's okay for me. And I've learned that. These are 7-grain Nature's Promise gluten-free crackers. We have brown rice flour, potato starch, safflower oil, whole grain sorghum flour, quinoa, sesame seeds, millet, flax seeds, amaranth, and sea salt. So again, if you don't eat 5 boxes,
Crackers
pardon?
with the regular crackers?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, these are with regular crackers. It's simply made. I don't believe they're gluten-free, but they have minimal ingredients. Corn chips, again, I caution with corn, but corn chips and potato chips should have 3 ingredients in them: potato, salt, and an oil. Hopefully, it's a good, it's a decent oil. So when you pick up a potato, the red and blue, like there are blue corn chips, but the red and blue ones that are often served in the restaurant, you really want a red corn chip? Have you ever seen red corn? Indian corn, but that's not edible. So food coloring, your food dyes, again, huge with our young little people, huge.
yeah.
Huge. But it's not good for any of us. I had a client who came into me the first time, and she's like, one of my fallbacks is M&Ms. And I'm like, no!
Peanut M&Ms.
And so, I was very strict. No, you got to get rid of the M&Ms. I'll give you recipes. I'll make you chocolate treats or something, but you can't eat M&Ms. Eat a Snickers bar over an M&M because of the dyes in them, right? So, all right, questions?
Will you do a talk on cholesterol one day?
I will. I'll have to do more research. The hard part is a lot of this healthy stuff. Like the article that says if you go gluten-free, you're It's not good for your health, right? Any article that you read with discretion.
Yes.
Know where the article, who wrote the article. Like, is it a reputable medical system? And even if it's a reputable medical system, you got to be careful.
Who's funding them?
Who's funding it is exactly it. Because we don't want, do we want to, as a culture, to live by let food be your medicine and medicine be your food, which is a Hippocrates quote? We don't want to live by that because that's a lot of money from not going to the pharmacist.
Quick question. A lot of times if you're in a restaurant and you ask, for gluten-free toast, they'll ask you, is it a sensitivity or an allergy?
Yes.
Because they don't want you to have it
'Cause there's
cross-contamination.
Correct.
They prepped it.
No restaurant, unless it is a gluten-free restaurant, I haven't seen one yet.
There's one downtown now, I guess. I just read about that in the paper. That they have
Ooh.
a whole separate.
Kitchen?
There's a new one downtown, I guess.
The
and there's-
Trillium?
They have a whole, no, it's not Trillium. Trillium has a lot of gluten-free options, and it's delicious. But this is the new one. I haven't been in yet, but I was reading this. They have a whole different section to cook the food that's gluten-free.
Okay, so there you go. Perfect. And that, I have not seen that yet. But most restaurants, they ask you that, is it a preference or is it an allergy? Because they cannot guarantee that it has not been cross-contaminated with
And the
When you're
toaster
making
or.
a dough, flour
anything.
flies everywhere.
Right. It's like the pesticides, is if you have, an organic farm over here and a farm that's using pesticides, what happens when the wind blows, right? So that's why I say know your farmer and just, do the best you can.
So is it okay though, if they have, if you're not, if it's a sensitivity, like Wayfarers, they'll ask you that, and they have gluten-free, they actually had Abigail's Bakery toast, the avocado toast, but they'll ask you that, and I've assumed it's okay.
For most people, it is okay.
Yeah.
For most people that are sensitive or intolerant, it's okay because it's probably not enough to set you off. However, I'm not as sensitive as Cindy is. Wendy, I don't know.
I do the avocado toast at Wayfarers.
Okay.
I've been okay so far.
So, and there may be a day that she goes in there and she's not okay because maybe there was something else that, there was more contamination than normal for whatever reason. It is possible, or just where her body is on that particular day. So, but, that, like I never, that's not an issue for me at all. And if it is, it's usually, something that, there might be something else, or if I don't feel good, it's not like I'm down and out for a day. I just felt like that rice blend, I just felt like I had lead in my pants, and I didn't keep up with my buddy that day, cross-country skiing. I'm like, just go. I mean, I'm serious. That's exactly how I felt, and I just couldn't, and it took me a while to kind of put it together, but I was like, it was crazy. I felt like I had 20 extra pounds on me. And that was just the inflammation and where it kind of just stuck. So, think about how you feel. Think about how that interrelates with food.
I just want to say that I really appreciate the sensitivity conversation, because I always thought either you were celiac or you were not. And my son's girlfriend drives me insane because she thinks she's gluten-free, but so I made her go have a test and she's not. But so we have this thing all the time about, get a grip. She's a drama queen and I think she's making it up all the time, but now I more appreciate, and I also, when she comes up, I don't really know what to buy or where to buy it,
Okay.
and I know I should be eating healthier too, but that's really the main thing, is to figure out what I do with her.
Right.
I'm hoping he dumps her so it won't be a long. But just to realize that there is,
Yep.
you don't have to be celiac to have these
No.
kind of.
You can have,
issues.
like I said, there is a blood test. It's a simple blood test to do food sensitivity. It's not 100% accurate, but it gives you a guideline. that you can use. And for her, I have plenty of friends, even, not in my professional business, but plenty of friends who just feel better not eating gluten, me being one of them. They just feel better not eating gluten. They don't have the skin issues, they don't have the joint issues or the headaches or the gut issues. They just feel better. And I think as individuals, we just need to respect that and do the best we can. And as best we can. And it's because it isn't. There's a huge difference between celiac and someone who's sensitive or
Just one comment on those IgE tests, because I cannot have shellfish. There's certain shellfish I haven't had it in 10 years. And I have a really strong reaction, and it's not great. Yeah, it's scary. So they did the IgE recently, and it said, "Oh, you're fine with shellfish."
Correct.
But I haven't had it in 10
because it's
years.
not in your system.
It's not in my system.
Right.
So if you haven't had, you go to get that blood test, and if you haven't had gluten for 10 months,
Yeah.
a year, whatever it might be, it's not going to show up. And
Yes,
that's what
right.
that-
Yeah.
And
It
I was
is-
like, I wish I'd known that before I had to do blood work, because I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
What does the IgE mean?
Immunoglobulin.
I can't remember.
Immunoglobulin something?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to ask?
So it's a
ask about
capital
this?
I, little g, big G.
Right.
You can ask for it.
There's a couple different ones.
There's a couple different. You can go online.
Okay.
Everwell.
Insurance probably won't cover it, but.
Yeah, well.
No, but I'm not sure the.
If you go to your doctor and you have it, they might.
Right.
If you can say,
If there's a
Right.
I think
diagnosis,
I
maybe
might
help,
have
then
some
they'll-
symptoms.
Yeah.
Insurance is another animal.
Yeah,
It's
that's
yeah, that one I won't discuss.
Yeah,
When I
don't-
had
My blood pressure would go up way too high on that one.
They
It's one of the
didn't
reasons I left
show-
traditional medicine.
Mine didn't show that I had a gluten sensitivity, right? So I started eating gluten again. And I'm like, no, I do.
Yep.
So it depends, there are different
It's-
types of tests and they're getting better at it.
Yep. To me, it's a guideline. Like some people need black and white. They need the black and white. So if they have the IgG test and it comes up positive, then they know they need to pull that from their diet. If it doesn't come up, like eggs, for a lot of the clients that have done the IgG, eggs are on there. And I'm like, and it's white and, the whites and the yolks. And so I questioned my mentor. I'm like, so why are eggs always up there? Well, because, even if we don't eat eggs on a regular basis, like eat eggs, they're in the cookies, they're in the cake, they're in, a lot of,
Exposed to it a lot.
so you're exposed to it a lot, right?
Some inoculations.
Yep.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
What do you
They'll
think of
ask
the
you that.
elimination diet to try to figure out, eliminating all the usual suspects?
Mhm.
Have you found that to be effective too, or?
The elimination diet is extremely effective. The biggest issue is most of them will say, elimination diet is you take away the big culprits. Gluten, dairy, sugar, and alcohol is in the sugar. Eggs, nuts, corn, and soy. Oh, I got them all. I always forget one. So you take all of those out, and you do it for 3 to 4 weeks. And then the biggest issue is introducing those foods back into your diet. A lot of times I recommend reintroduce one food at a time. I ain't telling people to go slower than that. First of all, I like the fact that they're eating cleanly, and if I can stretch that out a little bit more, that's a very selfish coaching part of me. But really introduce one food group at a time. Like if you really, like I ask people, what did you miss the most? And sometimes it might be, meats usually go out of there for some people. Some people can't go without meats. They need that protein. So I just have them decrease the amount of meat and eat as clean as meat as they can. That depends. But some elimination diets will have it in there, some won't, depending. Anyway, so if you're going to add, if you really missed your yogurt, you're going to add yogurt. Okay. Stay with that food group for at least 3 days. And ideally that food for 3 days. But you can see how that would get really long. But stay with the food group for at least 3 days.
Question. So if the 3 days, if the gluten can stay in you, or whatever the allergen is, can stay in you for 3 days, and then you add the next one, could you have like a mixed reaction?
You could. That's why I say do it slowly.
Okay.
You know, and don't go overboard. I mean, one of the things you can do is, I've had, you know, you can think, oh, I'm gluten-free. I can eat as much ice cream as I want, because most ice cream doesn't have gluten in it. Then you're creating another issue, just adding more, you know, more sugar or more lactose. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So that's why I say slowly add it in, because you can, which gets hard, because after, you know, the big deal is after elimination diet, you feel deprived. Don't think about it as being deprived. Think about it as changing your eating patterns. And then, so,
Give yourself variety,
correct.
you know, try some vegetables you've not tried, and you'd be surprised.
I tell people all the time, go into the produce aisle and try one new food a week or a month, depending on how much you can do.
You know what's great is that Tuscan kale.
Yes.
Tuscan kale is one of the best stuff. You can put, I steam it, I just steam it and eat it. And I'll take a long thing and scissors and go ch-ch-ch-ch into my soup. Ch-ch-ch into anything, 'cause it
Yep.
blends, it's beautiful stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
But she's right. Variety is your biggest
yeah.
spice of life. Use your spices. You don't have to eat bland food. Use your spices. You know, recently there's a garlic and herb spice that if I don't feel like cutting up my garlic, which I always have garlic, I just use, you know, the garlic and herb spice.
And it's sodium free too.
Correct.
I get that at Spicy too.
We also, my husband and I, about a year ago, started, there's a food service called Hungry Root. And you
Yes.
look at the ingredients, it's 3-4 ingredients, and you can get a gluten-free option, which is why I've gotten all those pastas now, and they're delicious. But you can actually pay, it's costing us less doing the food service than it was going to the grocery store. And, I mean, the salmon comes from Norway, I mean, it's
Yeah,
just,
so
it's-
there's also Moink I just signed up
Yeah.
for, which is grass-fed sustainably, all from the United States. And they also offer the salmon is only fresh, because the salmon farms, if you've seen those, they'll
The
say
mercury.
fresh from the Atlantic or whatever.
Yeah. Atlantic salmon is not.
It's horrible. They are farmed and they have diseases
Nope.
and they
Yeah.
are,
You know what they eat.
they put fake color on them to make them look
Yeah.
pink. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. They're eating each other's waste.
Yeah, Pacific salmon or Norwegian.
Yeah.
So again, everything you need to be cautious with. You need to kind of be aware. The foods,
Oops, sorry,
it's okay.
sorry.
The
Telemarketer.
what Wendy's talking about, you know, it's kind of like eating more fruits and vegetables or eating organically. People say it's more expensive, I can't afford it. Do what you can. Choose what you want to be organic first. Like, you can't go into Hannaford's every single week and find organic of everything you want in the produce aisle. I'm sorry, it's just not possible. In the summer, you can go to a farm stand if you know the farmer and then know they don't use a lot of pesticides and herbicides, you can do that. But the rest of the year, you can't, they have some organics, but not everything. So choose, but eventually when you pull out, like, the whole thing about you're supposed to shop the outside of the grocery store, right? When you start taking out some of those foods, like those processed foods, I didn't even mention that word. That's a bad word. Anything processed, which is in a bag or a box or a container, right? Has more than one ingredient and is processed, right? So, but I'm talking about chips and cheese curls and all those things that, yeah. Anyway,
Glad you don't like them anymore.
right. But when you start, you don't like them. It's like taking salt or sugar out of your diet and you eat something, like you eat a Snickers bar after you haven't had a lot of sugar. It's like, whoa, that's way too sugary. So just, eventually the money evens out when you start, because you're not buying these other things, you're buying more fresh fruits and vegetables.
Right. And the other thing, like some of these services, like the one
Correct.
that I went with, is you are supporting local small farms, not these big ConAgra places and all that stuff. They are out in the fields, they're doing their thing, they raise them, what's the word I want, with
Grass-fed.
kindness, whatever.
Right.
No, but like
They-
like the pigs are out foraging in the little woods.
Free
and
range,
things
free
like
range,
that.
grass-fed,
And free
and
range, not just a cage where they can walk around. and
Correct.
pick.
and they're not all packed in together.
Right, and this.
And usually the farmers love their animals.
All recyclable.
And whatever they're taking in, whether it's the good energy of the farmer who really cares for them, or whether it's the food, is what they're putting out on the plate.
Judy, what was that?
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming. Every,
Happy.
WELL, every well. It's all one word. That's a food sensitive. You can do it online, and it's cheaper than what I can provide for you. So,
It's not Everly.
no, it's every well.
Okay.
And they've got, since they first started, they've got a lot more tests out there. But it's capital I, small g, big G, IgG, food sensitivity testing. I think it's about last time I checked, it was about $165. They do send you a pretty extensive report. If you have questions with that report, I'd be happy to go over it with you. The problem with me referring people to that is then they don't need to come see me because they get a full report. But
Every well, sorry.
yep, every well, every, EVERY, WELL.
WELL, okay.
Yep.
And that's a test for sensitivity.
It's a company that provides a test. They send it to you.
Am I supposed to be getting an allergy test?
It's-
That's not until July. It sounds crazy for an allergist.
That is crazy. They may have an allergy test on their website. They might have an allergy test. I'm not positive about that.
Every well, allergy.
It's worth looking into.
Yeah, I need it.
I mean,
Itchy all over the place. It's terrible.
yeah.
Leaf mold is out right now too.
I'm here for a while, so if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer some. There are some recipes on the back table that I just brought just for fun. If you run out, please put your email address and the recipe and I'll send it. And then there's the goodies with recipes over here. So feel free. If you did not get a rack card with my name and phone number on it, please take either a business card or a rack card. And if you have questions, call me, text me, email me. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much.
I don't want those. Those are for you to take.
Thank you very much.
And if I